Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024. Ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
We passed over a destroyed land. You were not needed, do not know what hell looks like. We can have today only one purpose, and that is to see this thing through to the end.
Meanwhile, in the Ardennes, the Americans have recaptured the initiative, moving step by step back over the lost ground.
The German soldier continued to fight on. He no longer had any great ideals. He still had a spark of faith in Hitler. He fought because there was nothing else to lose, and he was still searching for a last chance. By the autumn of 1944, there was scarcely a German family which had not suffered a casualty within the immediate family, or had not been bombed out and lost all their possessions. The German soldier was loath to have less conviction than those on the home front. Another motivation was the ever-increasing amount of propaganda flowing from Hitler's headquarters to the officers and troops. This propaganda was not based on fact. It was announced that in the near future there would be new weapons, masses of German fighter planes going into combat, U-boats in all the oceans, all too optimistic predictions emanating from the highest quarters concerning the industrial capacity, without due consideration of the damage done by the enemy air force to factories and manufacturing products, etc. And that was written by Oberst Gunther Reichhelm, who was a staff officer in Army Group B. And this extract comes from one of those foreign military studies that the Americans did at the end of the war with a lot of the senior German commanders. And one has to sort of take all those pieces they did with a slight pinch of salt, because it was all kind of, it's very much
after the event.
After the event, and Hitler was crap. We all knew this, but hands were tied, all this, Hitler wrote. But if you can sort of work your way through that, there's lots of just absolute gold in there, and I think this feels very convincing to me.
Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, and we're talking about the Battle of the Bulge, aren't we, Jim? Yep,
we are, and today it is Herbstnebel.
Herbstnebel, and what we're planning to do in this episode is actually start the battle. We're well aware that 2 episodes have passed in this series without any fighting.
Incidentally, have you come across that hilarious Instagram and TikTok, The German Mother?
Yes.
God, it's funny.
Yeah, it's very, very funny. I mean, maybe we should get her to read some of these.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
Anyway, I mean, yes, that passage is very, very interesting, isn't it? Because you can parse it, can't you? One of the things that, and look at it, the German soldier continued to fight. He no longer had any great ideals. He still had a spark of faith in Hitler, so he did have great ideals. There's some
ideals.
Well, some ideals, or a bit. And then, nothing else to lose, still searching for a last chance. It's fascinating stuff.
It's confused, isn't it? It's confused.
Yes.
It feels about on it, is my my hunch. Or certainly reflective of what Oberst Gunter Reichhelm is feeling, I suspect.
I think this is very interesting, this, because after all, after the war, this is one of the big questions. Why do the Germans continue to fight on? How are they doing it? And a lot of things are attributed to sort of structural or doctrinal reasons that the Germans are fighting, rather than looking hard at their motivation, right? And the motivation here is their backs to the wall. What else are they going to do? Your family has lost someone. There's vengeance, your back's to the wall, complete sunk cost. The entire country is a sunk cost at this stage. So the fallacy is writ large. I think it's absolutely fascinating, this. I mean, I wonder if this is what Gunter Reichhelm thought on the 16th of December, 1944, as you say, or is it a bit ex post facto, as it were?
Well, he's been asked, hasn't he? He's in prison somewhere in Bavaria or whatever, and or near Dachau, and they're saying, okay, so you were on Army Group B at the time of the Battle of the Bulge, which incidentally, we now consider our greatest battle. What were you thinking at that point? Why on earth were you still fighting? And he's sort of sitting there in his cell going, why were we still fighting? Well, actually, I think it's a whole host of different reasons.
Yeah.
What was I thinking then?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what he's concluded. And as I say, I just think that it feels convincing because motives aren't always clear cut.
No.
And you find yourself in a kind of mire, in a situation where you just can't get out of it. You can't.
Yeah.
You're stuck. Chaos is all around. And what's the alternative? The alternative is obviously to surrender. But how do you do that?
Yeah.
In the Nazi state?
And particularly if you think, surrendering to the Soviets is going to get, obviously this is a Western Front battle. But what's surrendering to the Soviets going to get you? Gulagged. Which, after all, it does for an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, it's fascinating. The question of motivation is ever interesting, isn't it? Because the flip of it is what's motivating the American soldier at this point. And we'll come to that because there's a couple of things that really feed into that in the Battle of the Bulge. Anyway, at 5:20 a.m., Herbstnebel begins. And this is well before dawn, because it's dawn at about 8:30 in the morning this time of year in this part of Europe. 3 hours till dawn, and the guns begin firing. Sepp Dietrich, who of course is an SS old fighter, not necessarily the most brilliant soldier, but nevertheless realizes that this isn't necessarily going to work.
Yeah.
It started and they know it's not going to work. His guns open fire at 5:20, and this is the 6th Panzer Army front, which is
the northern bit, the most important bit in the Germans' eye.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Because funnily enough, yesterday in my dressing room in the theatre, there was a World War TV channel. There were 2 channels on the TV that I was drawn to.
Yes, I saw that.
Well, one which was showing coloured in Second World War stuff. So there's a very long thing. I watched an hour about Kursk, which was interesting. And then what about the Battle of the Bulge? And then I switched over to the channel which was just showing Better Call Saul all day, which actually was a more rewarding watch. What was fascinating about this episode, and it's a Smithsonian thing, that this programme, is it focused very heavily on Bastogne. Very heavily on the black American soldiers who were murdered in the fighting in the Bulge. And really, you wouldn't know from watching that about this northern shoulder of the battle. Not really.
Well, there you go. That's why no one should ever watch any TV documentaries, because they're all crap. They just are, apart from World at War.
Unless they call and want to
I know this from personal experience. I mean, they're just generally not very good.
They're in a hurry. Yeah,
they're in a hurry.
They're also told, please don't say 2nd Tactical Air Force, or please don't use the names of the formations. They make people switch off.
And always say Nazi.
Anyway, so the Nazis of the 6th Panzer Army, they make their move.
Hardened elite Nazis.
Oh God,
Waffen SS.
Let's not. So dawn isn't until 8:30. So there's 16 hours of darkness. They're not elite. There's 16 hours of darkness this time of year. So most of the Americans, what the Americans have been doing, haven't they, is they have their forward positions, but they tend to have skeleton crews on the forward positions and then go back to cottages and huts and sheds or whatever, where they've got a fire going and they can keep warm.
Well, after all, it's a quiet front and it's the middle of December. And no one in their right mind would be attacking at this time of year.
Exactly. No one in their right mind would be attacking at this time of year. And so, lo and behold, the Germans attack. And it'd been very frosty the next day. Now, this part, we were there not so long ago. We were there in January. And this part of, it's Germany, isn't it? That's the other thing. We're in, this bit is the fatherland. It's forested. It's south of the Hürtgen Forest. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because things we've heard about the Ardennes, mainly from 1940, is that it's forested. So it's impassable. First of all, we've heard the French think it's impassable, but also you can hide tanks in it because it's forested. But actually, this part of the world, There's wide open meadows, great big open fields with hedge lines and with wire enclosure. There's patches of trees and then slabs of forest with single roads running right through them and fire breaks and all that sort of stuff. The forests are dense, but it's not densely forested, is the point.
Yes, that is the point. And it's not like it is further south, where the Germans had passed through in 1940 towards Sedan, where you have these very sort of, steep escarpments,
dramatic
rivers
valleys,
sort of curling round and kind of, it's very narrow and close. This is undulating.
Yeah.
Yes, there are hills, but you can stand on one hill and you can see a big sweep across to the next ridge.
Yes.
It's kind of more reminiscent of the southern half of Normandy than it is anywhere else, really.
Yeah.
But it's just that it's winter, so it's cold and it's overcast, there's lots of cloud. It's interesting because the American forward positions here, they're right on the Siegfried line, the West Wall.
Yeah.
German defences. So, where they are is they're dug in amongst Dragon's Teeth, these sort of concrete slabs that are kind of anti-tank ditches and all this sort of stuff, which they're making use of.
Yeah. And the German issue is they've got to get through the Siegfried line themselves.
Well, they've got to get through the Siegfried line, and they're doing the artillery barrage. The whole point is to kind of disturb the American forward positions. But because the Americans have been there for quite a long time, they've actually dug really pretty decent log bunkers because they're aware of shell bursts. So what they've got, they've dug out their foxhole, and then they've covered the top of the foxhole with trees and trunks and and logs and what have you and branches to protect them from potential tree bursts. Because when you're firing into a forest, it's not just a shell that's disintegrating and spattering shrapnel all over the place. It's also shards of wood, and that's so it's doubling effect. It's a bit like being on the top of Monte Cassino, where you have the doubling effect of not just the shrapnel but also the thin soil and lots of shards of rock.
But it's like a Napoleonic naval injury, isn't it? Great big splinters of wood flying about.
Yeah.
This is the main thrust, which is south of Monschau and north of St. Vit. And we'll be talking about St. Vit later on. Now, I think what's interesting about this is the guns start at 5:20, 15:35, 15 minutes later, they redirect the fire to secondary defensive lines and key crossroads, which is good for tearing up telephone wire. And then there's 2 further barrages. Now, just think about this. The Rhine crossing, Varsity, is a 5-day artillery barrage before that goes up, right? Because obviously the criticism can be you fire your guns and basically you're announcing your intentions, right?
Yeah.
And if you do it for 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes, and then it finishes at 7 o'clock. So it's been going basically an hour and 40 minutes. Then you stopped. Obviously something coming. But if you're shelling someone for 5 days, how are they ever going to know? When will this end? And it also just indicates, this is a big German offensive, but really they haven't got the stuff to do it. They haven't got the means to pull this off by any stretch of the imagination, have they?
No. The rough sort of plan is that what they're going to do is they're going to send forward these Volksgrenadier divisions, which are these new divisions that we talked about in the last time, but that have come into being in the autumn of 1944. But they're infantry divisions. So the infantry moves forward behind the rolling barrage once the barrage starts becoming a rolling barrage. They then take out the crust of the American defences and create gaps through which the armour can then plunge through. So rather like the Allies in Normandy, where they were using kind of infantry to do the grinding battle, to do the breakthrough, and the armoured division to then do the breakout, the actions of exploitation. The Germans are doing exactly the same.
Yeah.
And the idea here is that in this northern thrust, it's going to be the 12th SS Hitler Jugend Division, who anyone who's listened to our podcast about the Normandy campaign will remember them from all around Tilly-sur-Seulles and Caen and all the rest of it. This was Panzer Mayer's mob back in the summer of 1944. He's since been captured. He's now a prisoner of war camp in England. But this is the 12th SS. It's, again, pretty much completely reconstituted, another Phoenix division. They're going to do the exploitation. And what they've decided in this first bit, there's then also going to be 1st SS Panzer Division a bit further south from the 12th SS. So they're going to be doing the main yards, and they're going to be using 5 planned routes labelled Rollbarn A through to E. And in this northern bit, we're talking about Rollbarns A and B. So these are routes. But of course, the route through the forest, there's only one way to go through the forest, and that's on a forest track. There's no tarmac here or anything like that. So there's all sorts of potential hazards from just a purely kind of operational logistical point of view that could get in the way, because you're operating in winter with very, very heavy vehicles, much far heavier than they were in 1940, and trying to get on tracks which aren't really suitable for what you're trying to do.
Well, before anyone starts fighting back, you've got those issues. We talked about the Volksgrenadiers in the last episode, but it's 6 rather than 9 battalions.
So in a normal regiment, you would have 3 battalions, but in these you have 2.
Yeah.
So 3 regiments of 2 battalions.
Yeah, so they're not triangular formations, which means that, the suggestion is there isn't a reserve, right? That,
Yeah, exactly that. Because in what you would normally do in your 3 battalion regiment, 2 up, 1 back, and you can't do that in this.
There's another possible problem. But they've got the Sturmgewehr, the assault rifles.
MP44, yeah.
Yeah,
Looks just like an AK-47.
Which looks just like an AK-47.
Which I had the opportunity to fire just the other day.
And how was it?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean,
It's a shorter.
It's solid. It's got no kick whatsoever.
Because it's not the full rifle round like in the Mauser, is it? It's pistol-sized charge, isn't it? So it doesn't chuck the round as far. And the idea is you can lay down more rounds, which is, after all, a sign of 2 things. Is the Germans, because it's a pressed metal weapon as well, so the Germans are trying to make stuff quicker and more cheaply,
exactly that. And
also,
it is. You can just see it. When you've got a sort of a bunch of German small arms in front of you on the desk, and you pick up the Sturmgewehr, you just think, oh yeah, this is cheap. But it's really interesting because I wasn't very good with the pistols. My friend Stefan, my German friend Stefan, said that he would not mind me being his enemy if I was on pistols. But on the Sturmgewehr, I would not want you to be my enemy.
Well, there you are. But this is the point of the Sturmgewehr, isn't it? Is you've not got to be a marksman.
Crap and you still hit everything.
But they've done the usual thing, haven't they? There's veterans as a core, as a stiffener, to make sure that the people in charge or the people running it at least know what they're doing. And actually, we'll see there's a crucial difference in a lot of these formations. People in charge might not know what they're doing, but the NCOs do. But it's Luftwaffe guys, Kriegsmarine personnel. They've been combed out of other formations. They really haven't had much training, and they're not.
Well, the new guys haven't. The new guys haven't. That's the bottom line. And the big problem you got, and this is what we realised so starkly when we were over there, wasn't it? That actually, to advance across an open field towards a forest, which is where the Americans are, at the edge of the forest, you're exposing yourself, and what you really need is proper training. You need to know how to kind of move,
fire maneuver, flanking it properly, and all that sort of
stuff. All that, and of course they just don't. They get caught out because they're just basically advancing as though they're in the First World War, going over the top and sort of walking casually across no man's land. It's the same sort of thing, and they assume that because of the weather and because of the barrage that it's going to be kind of easy going. One thing I should just say about the Battle of the Bulge is it's incredibly confusing because there's lots and lots of units which all sound the same and they all have numbers.
I was just going to say this.
So I don't really know how to get around this, but I mean, I'm just going to say it. But I would say anyone listening, if you forget who's who, it doesn't really matter. We'll just try and the Germans, the Americans, whatever. But it is in this northern bit. It is the 67th Corps of Volksgrenadier divisions, and the first one.
This really makes me laugh.
This is actually really funny because the first Volksgrenadier division to attack is the 326th, and they're being defended by the 395th Infantry Regiment of the 99th Infantry Division. So anyway, let's just call the 99th Infantry Division. We're known as the checkerboards.
Everyone.
So let's call them the checkerboards.
Let's call them the checkerboards.
So the Volksgrenadiers came out and they were stopped by the checkerboard division. That's all you need to know. And there's an after-action report of one of the American officers in the 395th Infantry Regiment. Goes, out of the haze they appeared before the battalion position. They seemed to be in swarms, moving forward in their characteristic slow walk. The artificial moonlight outlined the approaching Germans perfectly against a backdrop of snow, and every weapon the battalion possessed opened fire. The German losses were terrific, and at 0655 they began to withdraw.
Yeah,
of course they're going to withdraw because they're just not trained. They're not trained to being slaughtered.
I mean, these formation names, I have to say, when we were there, Jim, I was basically slack-jawed in wonder how you were able to remember. Because it's the Americans where there's no mercy with these names.
No.
Right? Because it is the 395th of the 99th, and it'll be the 222nd Battalion of the 395th, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like...
Well, no, the real problem is when you come to armoured units, because armoured formations, a US armoured division is divided into Combat Command A, Combat Command B, and Combat Command R. So CCA, CCB, CCR, and R is the reserve. It's triangular. Yeah. So you've got CCA /9th Armoured Division, but also the 7th Armoured Division. And it's just, oh my God, it's so difficult. Yeah.
Problem is, so this attack gets absolutely nowhere.
Not the most northern thrust of all. Not at all. Gets nowhere.
No, that's the one that the whole thing's trying to pin and swing on. South of that, though, you've got 1st SS Panzer Corps, who are coming through the Klinkelterwald.
Yes.
And they're crossing the West Wall, or the Westfall in reverse. They're now held up by the 393rd Regiment.
Not to be confused with the 395th.
No, there's only, Wessex Division, Lowland Division, Highland Division. Come on, America.
The Devons, the Dorsets, the Somerset Light Infantry. It's really easy. They're all different.
It's really easy. But they've only got 2 battalions in this sector because they're doing the Ruhr Dam operation, which is the sort of the next phase of the Hurtgen battle, they're still finishing off that. So they're very hard pressed, these two battalions of 393rd.
Yeah.
And this is 277 Volksgrenadier with a battle group from 12th SS Hitlerjugend. This is meant to be Rollbahn B, but they abandoned Rollbahn B, don't they? They go, that's not working for us. And there's these two villages, the twin villages of Rockerath and Krinkelt. And when you go there today, you cross the road and you've gone from one to the other. It's not apparent where one starts.
But let's just what we should say is what you've got is you've got the Krinkelterwald, which is this huge, great, it's one of these slabs of forest. So you've got open fields coming up to it. Then you've got at the edge of the Krinkelterwald, the eastern edge of it.
Yeah.
You imagine it sort of running kind of roughly north-south. Yeah. You've got your Dragon's Teeth. You've got your anti-tank ditches. This is you've got bunkers. This is a Siegfried line.
Yeah.
What the Germans have got to do is they've got to push back the American infantry, which is on that edge of that forest.
Yeah.
Clear a route through which the 12th SS can then pass. The far side of this forest, which is a mile and a half, 2 miles wide, something like that.
Yes.
It's a decent slab, but it's not it's not vast, but it's substantial. Yeah. Then suddenly you're in open fields again, and then a kind of a mile away, mile and a half, something like that. You've got the edge of Krinkelt
going
and
back up and over the hill. So
yes, but it's a low hill. Don't think huge, great, chalk downland or kind of massive the Purbeck Hills or something. Or even the Derby Dales. This is undulating, slowly rising farmland all the way to the village on top of the hill.
But nevertheless, it's always the thing with these bits of high ground is it's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you're in Krinkelt and Rockerath, you can see down into where the Germans are coming from, where they push up.
But the truth is, by the end of day one, the Germans haven't even got through the Krinkelterwald.
No.
They haven't even got through the forest. They're supposed to have cleared the forest and the Panzer battle groups, 10 miles in by the end of day one. That's the plan. So they're way behind.
The Meuse in 3 days, Jim. The Meuse in 3 days, remember?
Yeah, across the
It's completely mad.
So at the end of day one, they're already massively behind schedule. And Gruppenführer Price, who is the commander of the 1st SS Panzer Corps, thinks, yikes, okay, well, we're going to have to get my 12th SS into the fray immediately to clear the route through the forest, ready for an attack out of the forest at dawn on the 17th of December. But the problem is, of course, this is supposed to be the exploiting force, not the attritional, grinding battle breakthrough force.
I mean, the Volksgrenadier have really had a kicking, haven't they? Because they're not very well trained, because they're built around their senior NCOs and officers. The casualties are high amongst the senior NCOs and officers because they've got to do the hard yard leading, haven't they? And you've got colonels leading battalions from the front and all that sort of stuff, because basically
they're the first to go.
And they're first to go. Their guys don't know what they're doing. Yes, fine, they've got this stiffener of experienced people, but the experienced people are getting killed or wounded. And
also, the other thing is, from an American defender, it's incredibly obvious who the leaders are, because they're going, come on.
Well, they're pointing.
We go, right, okay, so that's the sergeant, then we'll slot him. So he's taken out. And so it's really hard for these Volksgrenadier Division units to kind of maintain their cohesion. And rudderless, they just don't know what to do. And it's kind of way, it's not their fault. They're just not trained. And as we've said many, many times before, it is much harder to attack than it is to defend. You require much more training to attack.
Well,
and therein lies the problem.
Therein lies the problem. So as a result, Price decides to use his exploiting force to break through rather than break out. And immediately, so that's an immediate sign that on the end of day one, things are starting to go pear-shaped. Then there's
the Losheimgraben.
Losheimgraben, which is Rollbahn C and D, which are only a couple of miles further south. But
the Losheimgraben is an interesting road because it's still there. It's now a kind of beautifully tarmacked, immaculate Belgian road. But back in the day, it wasn't tarmacked, and it's a straight road that runs in a kind of northwest to southeasterly direction. So at a kind of sort of at a rough angle through the woods. And the idea is that the Germans are going to pass through the Losheimgraben, but the Americans are on the far side of it, on the eastern side of the Losheimgraben. So again, you've got to get past them first.
Yeah.
And then get your armour down the Losheimgraben before it splits into So to start off, the Losheimgraben is Rollbahn C and D before it then splinters into these two different routes, which basically means you're using double the amount of traffic that you would normally have on this one road.
And the German grenadiers, Volksgrenadiers, they come through the woods and they're into their own barrage. I mean,
they lose 60%.
That's disastrous.
Yeah, it really, really is.
But further down, they overrun an American company. And the Americans are under pressure here, but partly because it's a core boundary. Yeah. And so being organised is just that little bit more difficult, isn't it? Now they're under pressure.
Yeah. But again, it's the same story. They don't get through. That's the problem. So you know, but by the end of day one of X Day, as the Germans call it, the 16th of December, Obergruppenführer Price, the commander of the 1st SS Panzer Corps, visits the 12 Volksgrenadier Division and orders them again to attack at dawn. So all the way up this northern thrust of 6th Panzer Army. Price is tearing his hair out because he's going up and down these Volksgrenadier divisions, going, pull your finger out. You just got to get through it. Come on.
Yeah.
Keep going. You know, we're going to have another attack at dawn. We're kind of, you know, they're waiting for more armor and ammunition to come up on these clogged roads behind them as well. So, you know, this is not 1940 where Zielmannsegger, Ober-Zielmannsegger has kind of worked it all out to find details, and you know there's stacks of fuel already been laid out. You know, all the roads are immaculate. Very, very light vehicles going across in May. This is very heavy vehicles going across in winter without any of the planning that's come for 1940.
Yeah.
So is it any wonder?
Well, is it any wonder?
The takeaway is it's not going well for the Germans.
It's not going well here for the Germans. And he's ordering them to reorganise and attack in the morning. And they've taken heavy casualties. So amongst their officers and NCOs. So what on earth are the people still standing thinking, right, okay, fine, we'll gird our loins and try again.
But there is a big gap in the American line, which is between the 106th Infantry Division, which is the Golden Lions, which is on the Schneeifel, and they're brand new. And, you know, they're new to combat. They're in this safe area, you know, this quiet zone. And the 99th to the north, the checkerboards, there is a gap, and that is being held by the 14th Cavalry Group. Now, Cavalry Group, are, you know, this is Greyhounds, armoured cars, half-tracks. You know, this is not tanks and Shermans. This is a light reconnaissance force. And the 14th Cavalry Group, half their squadrons aren't even up at the front anyway.
No.
So there is this gap between the 99th and the 106th of about 10 miles or so.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit less than that, where there is hardly any American defences at all. And this is known as the Lossheim Gap.
And he has two squadrons up, and his reserve is 20 miles away.
20 miles. Which, you know, on a good day in an armoured car is no problem at all. You know, do it in an hour.
The other issue here is there has been a defensive plan for this gap in the event of a German attack, but because there's been this swap over with the 106th coming in, that plan
they've
hasn't
come in on the 10th 11th, haven't they? From taking over from the 2nd Division.
Exactly. That plan hasn't been relayed to 106. So it's not that there's confusion about that. It's just it hasn't been followed up on, and that people aren't across it the way they could be.
Yeah, exactly that.
And at this point, Jim, elite German fallschirmjäger into the picture, don't they?
Well, they do, and it's an amazing story, this, isn't it? And this is at the village of Lanzerath. Lanzerath is sort of nestled. It's got woods on the kind of northern side, and it's got rising fields on the southern side, and you can see forever up there. You look over kind of sort of the German borderlands, the Rhineland, I suppose it is. And again, it's more of this sort of rolling landscape of slabs of forest and open fields and things. But there is just this one road going through Lanzerath, and it then forks, and you can go down to Buchholz station, or you can keep going up the Loschheimgraben. But right here, it's a bit of a bottleneck, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's a very obvious place to do a blocking position if you'll feel so inclined. And what we have here is this is where the most southern part of the 99th Checkerboard Division are. Mm-hmm. It is the INR platoon, which is the intelligence and reconnaissance. And this is something that's unique to the Americans. They're the only ones who have it. And this is attached to battalion headquarters, and it's I think it's 16 men plus the commander.
Yeah.
So it's a small little platoon. And their job is to, you know, they interrogate prisoners of war, they capture, they do go behind enemy lines, they do, you know, patrol work. They are doing exactly that, intelligence and reconnaissance.
Yeah.
So they're known as the INR. And the INR of the 394th Infantry, the 1st Battalion of the 394th Infantry, is Lieutenant Lyle J. Bauk Jr. And he's got a bit more than his INR platoon. He's got some other men as well. He's got 36 in all.
And a couple of forward observation officers as well.
That's right.
Artillery spotters, he's quite a character because he was the youngest commissioned officer in the US Army at one point. So he went into the Army when he was 14 somehow.
Yeah,
and, lied and all that.
Honored fashion.
Yeah, exactly. The youngest officer in the Army. And he's regarded as extremely competent.
And frankly, proves it this day.
I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable, this, because he's made sure he's got extra weapons. He's got a Jeep with a 50 caliber on it. He's got extra machine guns, extra BARs and all this sort of stuff, Browning automatic rifles. And basically, and when you stand up where the memorial is and you look down, you can see why great columns of fallschirmjäger coming up the hill. And when we say fallschirmjäger, of course, these are not the men of Crete. These are not the men
They don't even have the roundy helmets anymore.
No. And again, they're people who've been combed out and put into the paratrooping garb.
Yes.
And basically, Bauk sees these guys coming, gets on his binoculars, says, there's basically a regiment of fallschirmjäger coming at me. He's told by regimental HQ he's talking nonsense. It's very interesting. He waits for them to come through the village, and a little girl goes out and points out their positions to the Germans.
Yeah.
So it's a dramatic business. And basically, they then make absolute mincemeat of the fallschirmjäger. They completely hammer them, don't they?
Well, because the fallschirmjäger just keep coming straight at them in kind of, classic kind of Battle of the Somme fashion. And the colonel who's in charge of the 9th Regiment is just, he's a former Luftwaffe guy who's just been coerced into becoming an infantryman, hasn't got a clue what he's doing. So he just keeps sending these men one wave after another over these open fields, and they're just cut to pieces by the American machine gunners of the R&R platoon. It's not until really later on in the day that the NCOs of the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment finally go, enough is enough. All the officers have been killed or wounded.
Yeah.
They take over and say, right, we need to outflank this position. This is the only way we're going to do it. And eventually Bauk's men are kind of overrun and they all have to surrender.
Yeah.
But they've inflicted more than 400 casualties.
Yeah.
The loss of one dead and several wounded on their own side. And again, right here in the absolutely most vulnerable part of the entire American line, 6 Panzer armies being held up for a whole day.
And Bauk goes in the bag, and it isn't until the 1980s that this R&R platoon get their sort of due, acknowledged as part of the story of the Battle of the Bulge. Anyway,
should we take a break?
Let's take a break. 3 days to get to the Meuse and 1 day across the Meuse. That was the promise, and 1 day's gone, and they got absolutely nowhere on the northern shoulder. We will be back in a second.
This episode is brought to you by the Nissan Armada Pro 4X. With a twin-turbo V6 engine ready to propel your adventures, up to 8,500 pounds of towing capacity to haul all your favorite toys, and space for 8 passengers, Nissan's most powerful car yet will chew up and spit out anything you throw at it. Learn more about the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada at nissanusa.com. Towing capacity varies by configuration. See Nissan Towing Guide and Owner's Manual for additional information. Always secure cargo.
This is an ad from BetterHelp Online Therapy. We always hear about the red flags to avoid in relationships, but it's just as important to focus on the green flags. If you're not quite sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify those qualities so you can embody the green flag energy and find it in others. BetterHelp offers therapy 100% online, and sign-up only takes a few minutes. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you, you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to discover. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen Report.
We passed over a destroyed land.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Murray and James Holland, for part 3 of our Battle of the Bulge series. 1 day's gone on the northern shoulder, and the
most important thrust, the main thrust.
Most important thrust. The likes of Lyle J. Bauk have held the Germans up. To be honest, when you stand there and look at it, it's ludicrous circumstances. It's completely ridiculous that they are able to do that. Now, the 5 Panzer Armee front, which is Manteuffel, of course.
Yes, Otto von Manteuffel, who we talked about in the last episode, didn't we? It's interesting because the American 5th Corps, 8th Corps boundary is also pretty much the boundary between the 6th and the 5th Panzer armies. Yeah. And the Lossheim Gap that we were just talking about with Lieutenant Bauk and stopping the Fallschirmjäger, that is the break between the two, effectively. And here on this front, there hasn't been a barrage beforehand. The guns have remained silent in the early dawn. Hitler has insisted on a pre-attack barrage, but Manteuffel just simply ignores it, knowing perfectly well that no one's going to, Hitler's not going to know.
Yeah, he calls it an alarm clock.
He considers it a World War I concept and completely out of place in the Ardennes in view of the thinly held lines. Such a plan would merely be an alarm clock to the American forces and would alert them to the daylight attack to follow. Hard to argue against that.
And he's had his guys patrolling, which Hitler had also forbidden, hadn't he? And checking out the American positions properly.
Well, and he's also gone forward himself.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And he knows that the Americans leave their forward foxholes at night. They come in an hour before dawn, stand to an hour before dawn. So infiltration rather than a barrage is the thing that appeals to him. So he's got, and artificial moonlight is the feature of this, which is searchlights on cloud, isn't it?
Yes.
Light up the sky, which is the thing, actually, Monty's moonlight. It's the thing the British have been doing too. And what he's trying to do is go past the strong points if he can. He's got engineers to bridge the River Ur, which is his first major river obstacle to cross. So, I mean, it's a much more sort of organised attempt to break through than Dietrich's effort. I think it's fair to say that.
Yes, and it's sort of, it's sort of marginally more subtle, isn't it?
Yeah, marginally. However, now you've got the Golden Lines. We're not going to bother. It's the 106. Don't worry about that. The Golden Lines division are holding
checkerboards to the north, Golden Lines to the south.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just not bother with the numbers. Although the 422nd and the 423rd of the Golden Lines are up on the Schnee Eifel, the ridge there. Second Division have planned to pull back in the event of an attack to another ridge, the Bleialf Ridge. And 106th, they've been told about this. And this is similar to the thing with 14th Cavalry Group, isn't it? They've been told about this, but they're brand new. They've only been in a matter of days. They haven't worked this out yet. They haven't properly figured out how that will work for them. So it's bad luck, really, isn't it? Unlucky timing, basically.
Yeah, and the big problem is that the first two regiments, the 422nd and 423rd, are kind of, they're out on a limb on the Schnee Eifel, kind of, they're on a slight bulge themselves, but bulge pushing into the German positions rather than the other way around. It's, had they all been on the Bleialf Ridge, they'd have all been fine.
Yeah.
They're not, though. They're a ridge forward. And it's quite interesting because you can stand on the Bleialf Ridge and you can look across to the Schnee Eifel. It basically, the ground slopes down in front of you for maybe a mile and a half or something, and then slowly rises up again for another mile and a half to the Schnee Eifel. So, you're looking at the next ridge along is sort of, 2.5, 3 miles away. They're parallel. Think of it like a sort of corrugated iron. That's what it's like. So, the Bleialf Ridge is on the sort of apex of one of the bits of crinkly iron, and the Schnee Eifel is on the next. And the 424th is just quite a chunk to the south. But it is the 422nd, 423rd up on the Schnee Eifel that get the kind of full weight of this. And basically, this is the 18th Volksgrenadier Division, which are moving in a pincer movement either side of them. They're going round them in a sort of giant kind of the horns of the buffalo.
Yeah, and this is very sensible compared to dashing your Volksgrenadiers on American positions, which is what's happened in the northern sector. And they're successful this, and the German guns don't start firing actually till dawn once this is underway.
Yeah.
And Manteuffel's other sort of ace up his sleeve is he's told his men to cut any wire they see and tear up telephone wires, destroy telegraph wires and all that sort of stuff, and to disrupt American communications. That's that's actually very, very successful, isn't it?
Yeah.
As it goes forward. So the Golden Lines are basically caught out, bypassed, and then do what they can to fall back, don't they?
Later on that day, overnight into the 16th, 17th. So the 424th is on this limb to the south at a place called Heckhutscheid, and they're attacked by a different Volksgrenadier division. And those Volksgrenadiers there opposite the 424th get pretty badly smashed, pretty badly hammered. And the 424th are able to kind of fall back in some decent order. But what's happened is the thrust by the 18th Volksgrenadier Division, which is coming either side of the 322nd and 324th, the two most northerly regiments of the Golden Lions, they're effectively kind of coming either side of them and surrounding them and swarming in. So then it's just kind of mayhem overnight once darkness falls, because of the 422nd, 423rd are pulling back to that next ridge, which is just above the town of Schönberg. And Schönberg is a little town which sort of nestles down in a confluence of valleys. And from there, from Schönberg, the main road runs towards St. Vit, which is a key town, and crossroads and so on, a railway junction. And that's another kind of 8 miles or so further west from Schönberg. But above Schönberg are wooded hills, and it is to there that the 422nd pull back.
Yeah, they're really in trouble, aren't they? They're being completely swallowed up, basically, by the German advance. And General Alan Jones, their commanding officer, he's in St. Vit.
He's a very cool-looking guy. He's got an Errol Flynn moustache. He's got a little pencil thin moustache. He's in his early 50s, but he looks younger. And there's a fantastic photo you can see of him with his helmet at a kind of, at an angle. His pencil thin moustache, looking like Errol Flynn in Operation Burma.
But he doesn't really know what's going on.
Well, he's cut off because he's in St. Vit, so 12, 15 miles away from his forward regiments, and all is chaos.
And I mean, this is the stage of the Battle of the Bulge where images of captured American soldiers and panic and all that sort of stuff kind of come from, really, isn't it? This is the bit that's to come. The American response is to, figure out what the hell's going on, what to do. So you get Brigadier General William Hogue of Combat Command B of the 9th, CCB 9th, for the 9th Armored Division, comes in to see Jones.
He's at St. Joseph's Closter in Faymonville, which is just sort of, very close to San Vit.
And he visits him that evening. CCB of the 9th are supposed to be supporting 2nd Division on the Ruhr Dam, as we were talking about the earlier offensive, the Ruhr Dam offensive that was going down, and they're told to head south. And this is one of the things, isn't it? There's this immediate redirection of people away from the dam battle, feeding them in, sending them in, trying to plug the gaps. And then Jones asks Hogue to help against the thrust against the 422nd, 423rd. And then Troy Middleton, who's the 8th Corps commander. And Middleton's an amazing man who joined the army as a private, and as Corps commander was, came above Patton in his class at West Point. Taught Eisenhower. He's like, at West Point. He's an absolute
So when Patton gets underway in Normandy at the beginning of August 1944, Middleton is one of his corps commanders who's switched over from First Army to Third Army, and now he's obviously he's back into First Army again here. And Middleton also says that not only are you going to get Combat Command B of the 9th Armored Division, you're also going to get Combat Command B of the 7th Armored Division.
So there are two Combat Command Bs, everybody.
I told you it was going to be complicated. But just remember, so one chunk of the 7th Armored Division, one chunk of the 9th Armored Division. That's all you need to know. But on the evening of the 16th of December, there is an infamous phone call.
Yes.
And this is where Middleton rings Jones and tells him that CCB of the 7th Armored is on its way. But Jones misunderstands and thinks this would be arriving by dawn of the 18th.
Yeah. So this phone call, they're trying to be guarded in the way they speak to each other in case someone's listening.
Because they're talking in plain speak.
It's open comms in plain speak. So someone might be listening. And also they're yelling down telephones at one another.
And it's also static, and it's not a great line, and it's not like listening onto your iPhone 16.
No. So I'll be Middleton, you be Jones. Okay. This is how the conversation goes.
I'm worried about some of my people.
I know. How are they?
Not well, and very lonely.
I'm sending up a big friend. Workshop. It should reach you about 0700 a.m. tomorrow.
Now, about my people, don't you think I should call them out?
And that's at the point where the plug gets pulled by the switchboard operator, so Middleton doesn't hear that. You know how things are up there better than I do, but don't you think your troops should be withdrawn? Jones doesn't hear that either. It's such a disaster.
But instead he says, I want to know how it looks from where you are. Shall I wait?
And there we are.
Clunk. That's it.
Clunk. That's the state of communications at this point.
Your call has been disconnected. Your call has been disconnected.
What?
This is the state of comms within, and this leads, this is a very, 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 very unfortunate development, isn't it? I think that's the best way of putting it.
I think it's a very good way of putting it, yeah. And the Americans are having the same problem that the Germans are having, i.e. there's not enough roads for the amount of traffic. And of course, if the Germans have got a load of traffic in this early stage of the battle, the Americans, which are 100% mechanized, have even more traffic to deal with. So the 7th doesn't get there by dawn on the 18th. So Jones has just misheard, and you can there is a recorded transcript of this conversation, and you can see how the
well, they're both trying to be guarded in the way they talk about it in case someone's listening. So they're kind of going, your people will be down with me soon.
Your big jobs will be arriving at.
Exactly. And halfway through it, the switchboard operator disconnects the call,
switch.
And then they're reconnected, and they just assume that they've. I mean,
they were left alone with the tone on the phone.
Absolutely terrible moment for that to happen. And aside from the confusion of being under attack, there is confusion in the orders. You'd have to feel sorry for Jones, really.
Well, so Middleton thinks he's telling Jones to pull back immediately. His forward regiments. And what Jones thinks is pull them back a little bit, because not too far, because we're going to be sending
there's help coming.
Combat Command B of the 7th and Combat Command B of the 9th Armoured Divisions to rescue. So 9th could be sent southwards to support the 424th who are out on this limb, while CCB of the 7th Armoured can be sent to support the 422nd and 423rd, who are also on a limb, but on those hills near Schoenberg, so i.e. further to the north, but are completely surrounded. But the truth is, they're not getting there that quickly.
No.
So unfortunately, suddenly these infantry battalions, regiments, are stuck out on a limb without much fire support, and it's a fire support. It's a shortage of fire support that they've got. And because they get cut off, inevitably you're going to start wearing out your ammunition in pretty quick order if you can't be resupplied. So that's the problem of being surrounded surrounded, it's not that you can't hold your ground. It's that you can't hold your ground if you don't have enough ammo.
Yeah.
It's the same principle as Arnhem and, 1st Airborne Division or anywhere else.
Anywhere where you're basically cut off from your logistic backup, isn't it? It's as simple as that.
And then further south again, you've then got the southern sector of the 28th, which is where the US 28th Division is. This is Norman Cota, who was the second in command of on Omaha Beach.
Yeah.
The 29th Infantry Division.
Either we die here or we, all that.
All that.
Yeah. Either we die here on this beach or we die up
or the 30th? I can't remember now. I'm out of theatres.
And they're smashed up again, aren't they? The Panzer Grenadiers here going into the Keystone Div, they have a tough time too, don't they? It's the truth.
Yeah, they do. And they can't get across. They just can't get across the Uren. So you've got the Ur and you've got the Uren, and they're both running in a kind of roughly north-south direction, either side of this corrugated iron of ridges. You've got the actual border, which is where the Uren is. And above that, you've got another ridge, which has got what's known as a skyline drive.
Yes.
And then it drops down again. And the Germans just sort of can't get through. So again, all the way along, they're not really, even on the front where they're doing really well, opposite the 106th Golden Lions, they're still not really breaking through.
No, they're not the French of 1940, the Americans, are they? Even though, for instance, 106 Golden Lions are brand new. They've had months. The men have had at least a year's training, haven't they? They're very well trained. But by the end of X Day,
yes,
on the northern front, the northern shoulder, so Dietrich's efforts have been stymied pretty much completely. Right?
Yep.
And then
they've got nowhere. They haven't even got they've got between a mile and a mile and a half. That's how far they've got.
Yeah. Whereas Manteuffel has done a lot better. And
he's gone all of 3 miles. But he has completely kind of surrounded 2 entire regiments of the 106th Golden Lions.
But the key is, it's not a great start for the Germans, is it? The 106th Division, right, who are brand new, supposedly, but they're much better trained than any German formation kicking around at this point, aren't they? Because
but because of that conversation between Jones and Middleton, they're not being reinforced and they haven't been pulled back enough to deal with. Because, you can trade space for time. It doesn't, one ridge in the Ardennes looks much like another and it doesn't really matter. The key is to hold the key nodal points. And, I suppose Schönberg is a key nodal point. But the really big one in that area is St. Vit. As long as you can hold on to St. Vit, you're all right. And the great thing about St. Vit is it's on a rise. It then slopes down either side, all around it in a kind of circle. So imagine it like on a sort of, it's perched on the top of the O2 dome, and then all around it are kind of are hills, and the hills rise quite steeply out to the east of St. Vit, through which the road to Schönberg, kind of 8 miles away, winds its way. So as long as you can hold that high ground to the east of St. Vit, you're all right. So the obvious thing to have done would have been to pull them right back to that line.
Pull everyone back.
And then, so you're pulling back. That's giving you time to pull back, but it's also giving time for Combat Command B of the 7th Armoured Division, and indeed Combat Command B of the 9th Armoured Division, to get into position as well.
Yeah.
Where they can make a proper defence, because A, you're shortening the distance that the armour has to go to rescue the infantry, but B, you're also lengthening the distance that the Germans have to go. So what they really need to do overnight on the 16th, 17th of December, so the end of once darkness falls, is for all those two regiments, the 422nd and 423rd, to have pulled right back, but they don't. They stay out on this limb, kind of near Schönberg, and that's the problem.
And shortening their lines, is a good way to be in control of your organisation anyway. But they don't take the opportunity. But by the end of
better summary,
by the end of X-Tag, things aren't going particularly well for Herbstnabel.
No,
So
not going well at all.
Join us for part 4 of our Battle of the Bulge series.
And in part 4, we're going to be returning to the northern line, where the northern thrust, where 6th Panzer Army is going through, and looking in some detail, I suppose, at one of the great engagements of the entire Battle of Bulge, which is the battle for the Twin Villages.
Yeah.
An episode which has just been consumed in the lust for Easy Company and Bastogne.
Yeah.
And forgotten about, but actually is really, really vital to the whole battle. And certainly to blunting the 6th Panzer Army's attack in the north, and deserves much better recognition.
It certainly does. Tragically, there were no journalists there, which is, I think, is what it comes down to. Anyway, thanks very much for listening. You've been listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, of course. If you need to subscribe, and I think you probably do, actually, so you can listen to all these in one go, you need to go to our Apple channel and become officer class, or subscribe to our Patreon, where there's live casts and stuff, or even better, join us at We Have Ways Fest. Our festival of Second World War waffle in September the 12th to the 14th, Black Pit Brewery, right next door to Silverstone. We look forward to seeing you there. We look forward to you listening to our next episode. We've found that this battle is bulging into our schedules and is taking a little longer than we planned. So join us for the Krinkelt Rocherat battle in our next episode, and much else besides. Cheerio.
Cheers.